Welcome to this THWACK Camp session. There's an API for that, an introduction to the SolarWinds Orion SDK. We'll be talking about and providing some live demos using the API.
Wait, before we even start, you mean API, right?
Yeah, I've definitely always heard it as API.
Well, I've heard it both ways.
No, it's never been both ways.
All right. Anyway, I'm Kevin Sparenberg, and I'm joined by Leon, whom everyone already knows, and we have a special guest in the form of Zack Mutchler.
I think this might be the first THWACK Camp session where all three presenters are THWACK MVPs.
I definitely hope it's not the last.
Same here. Now, I don't know about you gents, but it was truly an honor when I was asked by the community team to be a THWACK MVP when I was a customer.
You know, there really are so many benefits of using the SolarWinds products, but the biggest has to be the THWACK community.
I absolutely agree. However, I think we need to get along with the introduction.
Sure, so why not? I'm Kevin Sparenberg, and I'm a technical content manager, which means that I use the SolarWinds products to tell stories that make sense to technology professionals. If this were an RPG game, I'd be the bard.
And I'm Leon Adato. I'm a head geek. Yes, that's actually my title. And I get to do a little, product technical evangelism, so that would make me the cleric.
And I'm Zack Mutchler, and I do have the longest beard in the room.
Which makes you the wizard.
But Zack, what's your actual day job?
I'm a monitoring engineer for Cardinal Health.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Normally this is where we tell you what's being presented during this session. But I think it might be easier to start with what this session isn't.
Well, it's a little unorthodox, but I think we should go on.
Sure. We're going to cover the basics of working with the API, but it's not a primer on the best way to write scripts.
So there's no recommendation on tabs versus spaces?
Spaces.
4 spaces versus 5 spaces?
5 spaces.
Yeah. No, it's going to, and it's up to the individual, and it's also not going to be a primer on the Orion data structures.
So you mean like nodes as parent objects, which have child objects of volumes and interfaces?
Well, but they also have applications, which have components, and any or all of those elements will have custom properties.
Exactly. So we're not going to teach you SQL or the SolarWinds query language, or SWCL.
So that's a whole bunch that we're not going to teach you about. Yeah. What are we going to talk about?
Well, let's start with the 5 W's. Who, what, where, when, and why.
Well, I think we already covered the who.
Yep, that's the 3 of us.
So what's next?
Yes, that's next. What is next? So what is the SDK and API? Frequently at SWGs I get asked if it's an SDK or it's an API, and the short answer is, well, it's both.
Right. The software development kit, the SDK, is a bunch of tools that we make available to help you interface with the API.
Which includes the SWCL Studio, which kind of behaves a lot like the SQL Server Management Studio, but specifically for the SolarWinds API.
Right. That's exactly what I thought when I first saw it as well. So can we take a quick aside here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. We are referring to it as the SolarWinds Orion API, not the Network Performance Monitor or NPM API, because it's not specifically part of NPM or SAM or vMan or any of the other products that run on the Orion platform. It's part of the underpinning of all of those.
That's an important distinction. If you have any product that runs the Orion platform, you already have the API. It's just open and waiting for calls right now.
Okay, so that's the where. It runs on any server that runs part of the Orion platform in any part of your scaled out infrastructure. That means it runs on your main polling engine, any of your additional polling engines, and any of your additional websites.
And that's only part of the where. The other parts are going to be where can I get it and where can I get help?
Well, okay, so the SDK is published on GitHub. The downloads are there as well. And there's some wiki with some code examples and a whole bunch of other stuff.
Yeah, and for help, the absolute best place is THWACK. There's even an entire area set up just for questions about working with the SDK and the API.
So we are more than halfway through the 5 W's, which brings us to when. Now, if we go back, the very first post on the Orion SDK forum was November 25th, 2009, and it was moved to GitHub in May 19th, 2015, and then...
Those are really nice dates, but I think the question is more, when should I use it?
Oh, well, that's easy. Script all the things.
Okay,
hold on.
Okay.
Okay, so not everything, but when should we use it? Better question, when have you used it?
Well, I've used it for all kinds of automation. I've created tools for other teams to do like bulk unmanage and remanage of their objects so that we don't have to give them special access in the website. I've given other teams the ability to even create their own nodes at their own, whenever they build something in the cloud, they can throw it in SolarWinds, things like that.
Right, and you touched on something that I've used a lot, which is to build a separate web interface for folks to make updates to things when I don't want to give them full read-write access to the nodes or the interfaces or any of the other elements within the Orion portal. I can just pop up a simple web page, let them make a change to a description or a custom property without having full access.
Exactly. Yeah, and I had to work on the demo for several years, so what happened was I had a lot of Orion servers running simultaneously and a lot of import-export that had to happen, so I was exporting all kinds of stuff like the maps and the icons for Network Atlas, reports, application templates, and that's just a very, very small group. Okay, so the last W, why? For those unfamiliar with the API, why would you guys use it?
Automation.
Standardization.
How about protection?
Why protection?
Well, because although you can make changes in a lot of the Orion suite directly to the backend SQL database, that doesn't really honor the table relationships in the Orion data structures we were talking about earlier. So this might be okay for updating small things like changing the node caption or the description of something or maybe a single custom property. But if it fails horribly if you try to add or delete things. So within the database, you could delete a node and that would orphan the volumes, the interfaces, the applications, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Right. But if you delete a node from the API, the SolarWinds Information Service already knows what's related and does the work for you.
Perfect. Okay, so that's it. We've covered all the W's. Thanks for joining us on THWACK.
Wait. Don't we get to see any samples of how this is done?
Yeah, well, it wouldn't be much of a THWACK Camp session without that. Now we get the lovely choice of which language do we want to use. So the GitHub repository has samples in C#, Go, Java, Perl, PowerShell, and Python.
Does that mean we get to use the wheel of scripting?
Yes, yes we can.
What is that?
It's something that Leon and I concocted after playing Sysadmania. Yeah, if you could just bring that on up here. Okay.
Zach, you are the guest, so please go ahead and give it a spin.
Sure. Big money, big money, big money, big money, big money.
No whammies.
All right. PowerShell.
Oh.
Okay.
I've got a theory.
You want to test it?
PowerShell.
Okay. There's a perfectly logical reason for all of this.
Yeah, it's your session and you love PowerShell.
Well, not just that, but there is a logic to my madness. So first off, the SolarWinds Orion platform runs on Windows servers, all right? PowerShell is included with recent versions of Windows, so it's easy to get started. And yes, it's my session.
Does sound reasonable.
So let's go through a few quick examples of things that we've written to kind of help with this. Okay, so the example I'm going to go over is exporting Orion map files, because I realize that if you work with a couple of systems or you work with a dev system and then you go to production, if you kind of design the stuff in the dev, then exporting the map is fine, the underpinning and the architecture, but you don't get any of the icons. So then you have to move them and it gets to be a pain. So I created this. There's an example of this on THWACK, and we will be posting a link to this and a full detail one into the show notes. But I wanted to kind of go through this step by step so people understand what's actually happening here.
And to clarify, these are the network atlas maps.
That is correct. Yeah. So the maps you've taken time to build specific for your infrastructure with all the locations and the pretty things.
Yeah. Right.
All right, so line one here is super simple. First line here is just the import module. This is the Swiss PowerShell module. I've got the silently continue on there because if it's already installed, I don't need it to be re-imported. All right, next we're asking for creds and a host name. The reason we have this is specifically for this line here. So this line here builds the connection to the SolarWinds Information Service. It requires a host name or IP address and also the credential set. Now this is the kind of basics you need all the time.
Right.
These connections can be via certificate, they can be via Windows pass-through authentication, they can be through Orion local accounts, like the admin account that ships with the product.
Almost exactly the ways that you connect when you're interactively connecting.
Exactly the same ways. So we're going to actually go through these a couple step by step, but this is kind of the meat and potatoes here. This is a SWCL query, and it looks a lot like SQL because it's basically the same idea, except here, instead of pulling from a specific table, we're pulling from an object, which has a bunch of elements in it, which happens to be MapStudio files. Now, if I look at this in SWCL, these actually show up as an array of numbers. Well, I did a little asking around and found out that array of numbers are actually the bytes. So you can actually just take those and each individual one dump it to a byte. So I was like, okay, I need to move these out, then I need to work with it. So here we will actually get a list of all of them. We'll actually run it here. So this is where we run, we create a file list from getting data from Swiss with this connection we defined earlier using the query we just defined. Now the reason I've wrapped it in this measure command expression is because for me, I like to know how long some of these things take because these could have hundreds of thousands of records. These also could have 5 records, or they could have 12 records, but all of them are 10 or 12 megs each. So I'd rather know and be able to account for that, maybe changing the script in one way or another. For this system, I know we're probably going to be safe, but err on the side of caution.
Again, these are samples and examples for folks to build off of. So in a real production environment, you'd obviously want to build a lot more rigor around it to say, if this is taking longer than X, maybe I want to, suspend it or what have you.
Yeah, or even do it in a pagination style. So give me the top 5, give me the next 5, give me the next 5, and go through that way. So then I do some output, show the prettiness. It's like, hey, this is what ran, this is how many files I found. Now we're getting ready to actually do the meat and potatoes. And then I just have a for each loop. And that basically says, this looks complex. There's realistically this line. This is the file, get the data, that's that string of bytes, and then set the content out to a path defined as a byte, and force tells it to overwrite if it already exists.
Okay.
That's it. All the other stuff above, I've got the comments in there. Basically, I'm checking to see if the file path exists. Sure. And if it doesn't exist, I can't export to it. So this little kind of looper in here says, okay, this path doesn't exist, create that, then you can actually run your export. So if we actually run through this real fast, and I'm actually going to split screen this for you. So I've got one over here, and this is my data location. You can see it's defined here. And I can just run. Now if I execute this, it'll just take all those files that it finds and dump them out to the D drive in the data folder. So it's first asking me for my Orion creds. I'm cheating and using the admin.
You actually set the admin password. Crazy.
Fancy.
I know, it's insane. And that's it. Now it's going through. And this does take a minute. There are, I don't remember how many files, but there's nearly 100, and they're all varying sizes. And because this particular query here pulls the file name and the file data, that means if it's a 3 meg JPEG, it's got to pull that 3 meg JPEG back during this query. This is why I really liked having that execution time handler there to say this took this long and it's this many elements.
Yeah. Sure. Whenever you get promoted and the next person takes on these scripts, it's wonderful to leave the comments and the little write host and things like that so they can figure out what exactly was going on in Kevin's brain when he built this.
Right. Always comment your code. Good programmers comment their code. There's a whole series actually on THWACK from Corey Adler on just, who's just a programmer and, about what good coders do.
Exactly. Yeah, that was a great series.
There they go. They just start streaming in.
Nice.
Now the great part about this is you can actually write the reverse of this and do an import, or honestly, you can actually take this entire folder structure, put it into the default location on your Orion server when you're actually working with your Network Atlas, and all of a sudden, all of these icons will be available to you.
Nice.
So all the custom ones that were made specifically for the demo system, I can now move onto a brand new Orion instance.
Seems like that saves you a couple minutes.
More than a couple minutes. The caveat to this is I used to have one that did the same thing but skipped the sample maps, but I figured, why not?
Yeah.
So this was a real great way to actually get data out of your Orion system. But sometimes you want to get data in, like changing custom properties or creating custom properties and building them from scratch. So you've got an example of that, right?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and we'll do-si-do, and then you can take over.
Nice. With my example we're going to go over today, I'm looking more at how to reuse the same code snippets over and over and over and over without having to write them all out every single time.
Yeah.
So I've started really in my day-to-day building PowerShell functions. And I've got a couple of examples there in here for it.
Before you scroll any further, though, I just have to say that's some mighty fine commenting that you've got going on right at the top there. I mean, this is some world-class, like really, you took the time to version it. You took time to, identify what I'm doing and what changed. This is, you get props.
I appreciate that. I've been the victim of poor script management and trying to figure out what was that person thinking, and that person was actually me. Whenever I had scripts that I had built like a year prior, and I'm like, what the heck was I doing there? Yeah. So I've started adding this. I feel that it definitely does provide some value, and it takes a couple seconds to put together. One of the things I do really personally enjoy doing is in the description, because nobody ever makes their own scripts, right? We always find something on Google and then bring it down and say, okay, that's how you do it. I like to put, kind of where I got the idea from. And so this particular idea came from a section of the Orion SDK wiki on GitHub called Managing Custom Properties. So what we're doing here, we've got 3 functions built. The first one sets my Swiss connection. So if you remember in your demo, you had the connect to Swiss and ask for credentials and host name. This does all of that for you, but it's just a one-line execution.
So this is basically a wrapper.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good way to look at it. The next one, without going into the nitty-gritty, these samples will be available later. We're going to build a custom property directly into the Orion API.
Okay.
And then the last one is we're actually going to set the custom property example, or set the custom property value. And the way we're going to do that is basically just grabbing a node ID or an object ID and saying, okay, for this object ID, change this thing to that thing. It's really the more simplistic way to look at it.
Okay.
I will say that in this example, we don't really go too complex, but broaden your horizons. You could run a SWCL query to say, find me every node ID that matches this criteria, and then iterate through all of those for each. Do this thing and set in mass set things.
So in a very simple scenario, let's say you've got 40 machines that are going from dev to production, and they all have the same 4 characters in the middle of their caption name. You could say, give me all of the things that match this criteria, and set the custom property to production from development.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
Except for the fact that systems never have the same 4. Any naming standard is immediately invalid as soon as it's implemented, but that's a whole other THWACK camp session, so we won't talk about that.
So from there, I've got a small region here that's built for variables, and that's where we grab our host name, we build the name of the custom property, the description, the value type, the size. All of these things are outlined inside of that managing custom properties wiki link at the top. And then, for us, I'd like to build drop downs. I like to, kind of make sure that I have data validation in my custom properties, because typos kill.
Yes.
And
especially if you're going to try any type of automation or alerting, reporting, any of that stuff. If you've got that one person that puts the extra O or...
Or if you just type like I do and you put extra letters anywhere, because why not? And after that, let's go ahead and do some execution here. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set a variable called Swiss, and it's going to hold the PowerShell object for our Swiss connection. So we can highlight this line and hit F8 to just execute our highlighted portion in the PowerShell ISE here. And that's going to pop up a username and password, so go ahead and give me those.
No.
Oh.
Very good. Destiny would be proud.
Thank you, sir. Okay, and so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to run the new custom property function using the parameters we lined out in our variable above in order to create a node custom property. It takes a second or two, but you will get an output at the end basically saying, hey, you did it right, or you did it horribly, and start all over.
Okay. So the error trap is actually contained in the function itself.
Yes.
Oh, look at that.
Exactly. So I've got my right host in yellow there that just says we've created a custom property called dark theme is life, #dark theme. Entity type is Orion node custom property.
I feel like you have some subcontextual message for the community.
I don't know what you're talking about. So anyway, what we're going to do next is we're going to set the specific values for this custom property. Before we do that, do we want to jump over to the website and show that a custom property was created there?
Yeah, so let's go ahead, go into the browser.
So when we come over here to the website, what I like to do is jump into all settings and then go to manage custom properties.
Okay.
And then just verify that it is there underneath the node object type. And so right here, we've got our dark theme is life.
Okay, and here it says it is a node type, and you've got all the usage types that you can use it. So you can use it for reporting and grouping and filtering and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly, and real quick, that's a really good point. Let me show you something that we did throw into the function. Whenever you have a new custom property, one of the things that we've done for the usages is ensured that is for entity detail is set to true. There's a link here to a THWACK document post about Orion Platform 2018.2 where we can now customize our tooltip pop-ups.
Oh, okay.
Without that turned on, you can't utilize this custom property in the tooltip pop-up. So we want it on by default. There's really, in my time, I've never seen a reason to have any of these turned off. So back to our website. And if we go look at Dark Theme is Life and edit it real quick, we can see that the drop-down was created and it's got everything set up for us.
I made you use 4 options.
He made me use 4 options.
I made him use 4 options.
We're going to cancel out of this, and we'll go over to our PowerShell script, and I'll show you how to actually update a property for an object. So we're going to come back in here and run this pre-built function, and we're just going to do another F8 using the parameters we built above. Here we go. So if we go to node ID 75, we should now see that the value of dark theme is life is the string dark theme all the things.
Okay. I'm thinking the subtext is not being lost
I'm
on
still
any
thinking
viewers.
there's some message that he's trying to...
I feel like there's almost as if one of the drop-down options has the ability to show us where we can vote for the dark theme even.
Possibly.
And this is why we make script samples available in the resources.
That is accurate. So we're going to come in here real quick just to edit properties, scroll down a bit, and there we go.
There it is.
Dark theme, all the things. And one thing to note is what we did is very small in scale, and a lot of people might be like, oh, it'd be faster for me to just go do that in the website. Going back to what, once, exactly, right? But going back to what we said before, right? Does everybody need to be able to do that in the website? Do we want to give all those permissions out for our teams and things like that? And we want to really start getting into the mindset of providing self-service options for our customers.
Right, and to what we said at the beginning, standardization. The custom properties will be created the right way, the same way, every time, with, if you have a naming standard, if you have a drop-down policy of how the drop-downs are done, if you need those variables to be in a particular format because they're picked up by other external programs, all those things can be built into the script and standardized so that there's fewer mistakes that can be made down the road.
Exactly, and another thing, kind of going off of that, one thing you can do with your parameters in PowerShell is you can create validation against them. So, you know, I've got scripts that allow people to set up snooze windows, basically a maintenance window, but they can't set it up unless they comment with their initials. We have a regex string that says if there's not 3, letters in a row with a vertical bar behind them and then a request number or a change control number, we're not going to let you do this. You have to do it correctly or you can't do it. So that's just a small snippet of what we use in our environment. It's something that we can build off of and grow to bigger and better things.
So this qualifies as you do it once, do it by hand, do it twice, think about scripting it, do it 3 times, you should already have a script.
But taking that idea further is, that's about why we use scripting. But what you're showing is also code it once, code it by hand, code it twice, think about building in a function. If you have to do it 3 times, now start to contain those things into self-executing functions that you can then use multiple times and other things. And the 4th step would be libraries. But that's a whole other
thing. Well,
We've turned this into script inception.
Right.
One thing to really know about this, though, is that there is another module available for PowerShell on the GitHub called Power Orion. And it's, instead of just being the basic commandlets for PowerShell to interact with the API, it's doing this. It's taking the idea of a function like create a new node, and it builds it inside of a commandlet inside of PowerShell. And so anybody in the community is more than welcome to go and do pull requests, and Tim Danner and his team will review those, and if it works out, they'll actually load it into the PowerShell Power Orion module, so you don't have to build functions, it's just there.
And your code legacy can live on for future generations.
That is true.
And it's all on GitHub, which means anyone is free to contribute to it. So if you actually have, and I've done it before, I've said, I don't like the way this does something. It should be doing this instead, or at least give me the option. And a couple weeks later, it's like, yeah, we're going to fix that. And then a little bit after that, it's done. And then I just download new bits.
Exactly.
This PowerShell fun is delightful, and I'm going to completely trash it now. I want to take a step back, both in terms of complexity and also in terms of generational code usage. So I'm going to swing in here in a second, and we're going to take a look at something completely different.
Great.
So as you can see on the screen, there is exactly one line here that we care about. I will explain this line in a minute, but let me frame the problem we're trying to solve. One of the things that you and I talk about a lot at SWUGS, and we've all talked about as just monitoring professionals, is that the polling cycles, both the ping up-down availability and also the data collection cycles that we do, is if you apply the default to everything, you are wasting polling cycles. There are many things that need to be monitored, but not monitored particularly aggressively. Things that are in labs, QA or dev machines, et cetera, et cetera. Meanwhile, at the other end of the spectrum, there are devices that need to be monitored very aggressively, far more than the defaults. And you want to be able to adjust those. But if you're going through the Orion portal, through the GUI, managing those things, changing those polling cycles, can be a pain.
Tiresome.
Sure, we'll say tiresome.
Okay.
So what I want to be able to do is, based on some criteria, we'll say that there is a custom property out there that's called sev level, and the sev level 1s are my most important, the sev level 5s are my least important. I want to read that custom property, and I want to interactively adjust the polling cycles based on that. Now, the sev level can change. Maybe an alert updates the custom property, which changes the sev level, which then should automatically go and affect the, okay, so there's a level of internal automation.
Yeah.
So the first thing I want to show you is that, and this is Swickle Studio. In Swickle Studio, I just did a very simple query. I'm getting the node ID, IP address, caption, and really what I care about is the poll interval and stat collection interval. These two intervals, the poll interval is the up-down every 120 seconds. The statistics collection every 10 minutes. Those are the defaults, right? So what I want to be able to do is interactively change those numbers based on whatever my criteria is. That takes me back to this line of code. That's what this line of code does. Okay. But if you're just looking at, oh, and by the way, this one line of code written in Perl.
Perl.
Of course it is, because I like Perl.
It's Leon.
Because it's Leon.
Now, part of it, besides being petulant and holding on to languages which probably aren't the most appropriate anymore, the other reason is that the Orion SDK really does support whichever linguistic predilection you have.
Yes.
So I did it in Perl because I can.
Flexibility is the key for using the SDK and the API.
Exactly.
It is flexible to whatever needs you need.
I actually just had a conversation this morning with another MVP looking to get into API usage, and he was like, what language do I want? And I said, yes.
Yeah, anything that speaks REST and JSON, you can do.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, a lot of this, when you take a look at the sample script that we're posting as part of the show notes, a lot of it is just dressing. I've got this whole block here with the query that I just want to make sure that what I did is what I did.
Yeah.
The only thing that matters here is the getting the URI. In fact, I have the basic steps you need to do for this update listed out in a slide here. Okay, so step 1, you need to get the URI, the Universal Resource Indicator, for the node or the device that you want. We're going to call that variable client URI. The second thing we're going to do is create a hash, not an array, not a string, but a hash of things that you want to update. And we're going to call that the new poll value, because that's what I'm updating, is my polling values. And we're specifically changing the poll interval and the stat collection. The third thing is we're going to change that into JSON using encode JSON. That's a command. Okay. And that variable that's going to have that JSONified hash is called new poll JSON. And finally, we're going to put it all together into the post command you see there. So I have my post command, and it's going to go to the specific function call, which is the JSON function call. It tags or appends the URI onto that. It gives you the new poll JSON, which is that hash of the things I want to change. And finally, you need, for Perl at least, you need to tell it what the content type is. So within the French brackets, you put in the content type as application JSON. Okay. That's it. That's all you need to do. So going back to our code example here, what I'm doing is I've got the URI, there we go, up here. Here's the client URI. Everything else is cute, but all I'm doing is making sure that I know what I'm doing because I like to overcomment my code. Yes. Then I'm taking the hash, which new poll value hash, and it's got the stat collection. We're now going to set as 5. Poll interval is 60. And we're going to JSONify that with the encode JSON for the new poll value. And finally, we put it all together. So what's that look like when it runs? There we go. I get what it was before. Wait for it. Message for you, sir. And finally, I can see, at least as far as my code is concerned, my poll interval has changed to 60 seconds. My stat collection has changed to 5 minutes. If I go back to the Swickle Studio and refresh that, you can see that the values have changed they've changed in the database also, and I've just proved it. My point here is that A, Perl is awesome, and I will never let go of my love of Perl. B, the things that you're going to do with scripting don't have to be particularly, monolithic or monumental or complex or deep. They can be a very simple function. But once again, if you're going to do it more than 3 times, you can script it and you can automate it, and it can have a really massive impact on the stability of your Orion environment, because now you're saving your important polling cycles for the devices that need them most, and you're able to interactively adjust those without a whole lot of manual GUI clicking and things like that.
You're also saving your important brain cycles. You're opening up all those man hours annually that you can use to work on other things now.
Right.
See, earlier I said script all the things.
Okay, fine. So that was a ton of content.
Yeah, we really tried to cram a whole lot in this session, but we're going to make sure we provide downloads of the scripts and the references. We're going to make sure we provide links to the SDK. We're going to provide links to the THWACK forums for questions, and that way everyone out there can go ahead and play along with the home game.
You know, he's really taken this game show analogy a little too much.
He takes everything a little too far.
That's kind of what I do. So for myself, Zach, and Leon, thanks for watching this session, and enjoy the rest of THWACK Camp.